Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. It's the Alternative Perspectives podcast with Naldo. And remember, if you're searching for it online, check out the app 868. You can look for it on YouTube or any one of your podcasting platforms. And today we have a very, very interesting interview with a very special person. Yeah, he is a life coach. He has been doing it for 5 years. Very, very interesting guy. Trust me. Right? His name is Brendon Bess. So Brendon, welcome and thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to jump into the conversation.
Nice. So, life coach, right? Such an interesting title, such an interesting job. Tell me, what is a life coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So a life coach essentially is someone who helps people to accomplish their goals.
Right.
In a real short sense, that's what it is.
So you like Hitch?
Maybe.
All right.
I guess. So pretty much, I usually tell people I help to architect breakthroughs
Right.
in people's lives. So typically there's some sort of a problem, there's some sort of an obstacle that people want to overcome. And what I do is give them a perspective, and sometimes an alternative perspective, right? To something that they may be going through. And it is in sort of shedding light on those perspectives, you sort of get clarity on how to overcome things. Yeah.
So it's kind of borderlining or close to something like psychology.
Exactly. It does have its tails in so many different things.
Okay.
So what I am not is a therapist.
Right.
And that's very important to state. And I usually, in my initial consultation with clients, let people know that I am not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I help you to accomplish your goals. And so I try to keep it very, very focused on that, because there's, so many things to jump into there. But it's all about goal acquisition. It's all about that accountability that's necessary, that's needed to accomplish the goals that they like to have.
All right. So what took you down that road? Because let's be real.
Yeah.
In Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah.
you don't hear much about life coaches.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So our parents, our Caribbean parents,
Yeah.
you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer. You understand?
What are you?
What are you doing? You're wasting time in life. Right? So what took you down that?
Yeah. Okay.
path?
So very, very interesting question. So here's where it kind of started. I have always been very interested in education. I've always wanted to be a teacher, but not necessarily just in the traditional sense of being in a classroom. I think what that for me was my love for learning spaces. And so as a coach, when you really think of a coach, you think of somebody who brings out the best into someone, helps, gives them exercises, drills to sort of improve their skill set. Yeah. So for me, I pursued a degree in education and I loved it. I went to Toronto to study, and it was after I studied, I kind of got into a bit of a depression, because all along through my university career, jobs were being offered to me, because I had a very lucrative degree with French, and English and education. And so obviously being in Canada, that's the two official languages. So my parents were like, no, finish, like the job will always come back to you, but they never came back
Honestly, serious.
after graduation.
Wow.
Yeah, because at that time there was a real, it was very difficult, because you had a lot of retirees or people within the teaching service who were not retiring. So I had just happened to, fall into that realm, and it was just exceedingly difficult to get a job after. So the type of person that I was like, okay, well, I need to do something. And so I actually found a life coach. And I was like, hey, I feel like I'm stuck, I feel like I have this mindset that I came all the way from Trinidad. I spent all this money on my education, got the degree, and then boom, no jobs. This is madness. And so when I went through that life coaching process with that coach, I realized that I had certain, amazing things inside of me that I could use and utilize to help other people. And so That was kind of like my initial tip into life coaching. And then, I'm a firm believer in doing the work that's necessary. And when you do the work, destiny conspires to really take you to that next level. And so, so said, so done. I ended up getting a job after the coaching, which was interesting, to be a community capacity builder at an very interesting position, right? And so basically I was being paid to create empowerment programs for youth in a disenfranchised neighborhood.
In Canada itself?
In Canada, that's correct. And so, I did that for some time, and then I made a decision to come back to Trinidad. And, I was really encouraged by a supervisor. She said, you'll be a great consultant. And I'm like, maybe I might be a great consultant after all. Because she saw something in me that I think I knew was there, but hadn't been really tapped into. And so when I made that big decision to move back to Trinidad, I naturally opened a consulting firm where I practiced the life coaching. Because I realized I had been sort of doing it, not only in taking that life coaching, but also jobs that I would have had in university were pretty much what a life coach does. Right. And I'm like, but hold on, I have so much experience in this. And when I was a life coach, I realized that a lot of my skill sets surrounded, helping people and helping to develop their potential. Heck, I have a whole degree in education as well too. So I'm like, well, this is just making sense now. But
tell me something. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the decision to move back to Trinidad, and I'll tell you why I asked that.
Yeah.
After.
Yeah. Boy, that's always a difficult thing to chat about. I'll tell you why. So I am a Christian. Mm-hmm. I value my relationship with God a whole lot. And, I tell people I have this gift where I hear God's voice very clearly. And so I remember there was a time where he said, hey, I want you back in Trinidad. Okay. And there was a part of me that really rebelled against it because, the idea is, why would you leave a country like Canada and return to Trinidad? To everybody that knew you left, it didn't make sense, mm-hmm. And if I'm to be really honest, they always say 2020, hindsight is perfect vision. Mm-hmm. I realized that my destiny in Canada had ended. The time was up. The time was up for me to be there. And I'll be honest with you as well too. I really enjoyed my time in Canada because I was able to be exposed to so many different cultures. Heck, my whole degrees were from there. So I went to school, throughout the system. And I remember there was a moment that was so defining for me while doing a mentorship program in Barbados. From my university. I remember we had finished the program, it was 3 days of the top 50 students in the Caribbean who had applied for the program. It was a big deal. And I had been chosen to be a mentor for them. And I remember being in the pool, Naldo, and I said to myself, I had a thought. And the thought was, why shine a torchlight in the sunshine?
Mm-hmm.
Which meant that why could I not use all of the amazing skills and experience that I gained from Canada and use it where it was needed?
Right.
In the Caribbean.
Because that is what I was going to ask you. I think a job like being a life coach, they would have so much opportunities there for it. And I guess an easier path.
Yeah.
Career-wise.
And you're right. You're absolutely right. Because I have coach friends who are in and they're earning 6-7 figures a year, mm-hmm. and I'm not there yet. But there's definitely a greater market. However, I think one of my biggest decisions is that I've always been somebody that was very proud of my heritage. But there's also a part of me that also wanted to help with some of the issues that I think we're unfortunately notorious for, which was that whole mindset. I think part of my education in studying education was learning of a whole different education system. And I think one of the things that the Canadian system really values is emotional health.
Right.
And having a high emotional quotient, and emotional intelligence. And I felt that, I have all this experience, I have all this knowledge, I have all this great skill set that I learned here. Why not bring that back to the Caribbean? And so all of this was what was going through my head in returning to Trinidad and saying, I can help out, I can add, I can lay my mark, on my home.
But all right. How open are people, let's say in Trinidad and Tobago, with adopting some of those things that like the emotional health and...
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well too, Naldo. I'll tell you what. So I would have obviously spent from 19, I spent 8 years in Canada. So I left when I was 19. So pretty much my early adult years were in Canada. So that was, and I seldom returned to Trinidad, like maybe 3 or 4 times is so much, during that time period, right? Because after university, I decided to stay, work, I got married there, the whole shebang. And what I realized when I came back, it was like I was relearning Trinidad. And I realized, wow, there's so many things that has changed. My mom sat me down and she said, Brendon, Trinidad has changed from when last you were here. And one of the changes that I realized was that people were more in tune with that sort of emotional side. So for instance, when I was growing up, there was a narrative that, boys don't show emotions. There was this mindset that, if you express your emotions, even as a guy, or just anybody in particular, you're a wuss, that kind of way. But I realized that perhaps that was changing, and perhaps maybe destiny was conspiring again to come back at the right time where people would be more open. And I do feel that people are more open. One of the things that I do as a life coach is that I go and I do workshops at schools. And from the feedback that I get, students are open. I remember one time a student said, when I asked them, hey, what problems do you want to solve? Nobody asks what do you want to be when you grow up again. That's so like 1950s, It's like, what problems are you wanting to solve? And I remember one person said, mental health in the Caribbean is an issue that a lot of people aren't addressing. And I was blown away because I'm thinking that this is a 17-year-old, young lady who's thinking about something that maybe when we were growing up, right? You hardly heard of.
I mean, yes, we understand, because as soon as you show any signs of having problems, you either say you're mad, or hey, drink something and get over that. You understand what I'm saying? That was the mentality. But can I ask what school that was, though?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to figure out the demographic.
No, that was Bishop's Trinity,
right?
That there was a sixth form.
Because if you understand what I'm getting to, I think
go there.
I think the demographics. Let's be real.
Go there.
So children who go to those schools would obviously have a different exposure, different access to different levels of education, and whatnot. Yeah. So I think the problem, as much as you think it might be changing, and we are thankful for any ounce of change there is.
Yes,
but I think the majority is still problematic.
Yeah. And you know what, Naldo, as well, too? I have been to other schools as well. So I remember just going to El Dorado Secondary, right? Which is a completely other different demographic. In fact, I was asked to come in to that school twice. One, because they have a behavioral stream. So I was asked to come into the bunch of bad boys and to chat with them. The guidance counselor there, she does an amazing job at really trying to give them. And I think what it is we're talking about is social capital. Social capital is that ability to give students, the benefit of understanding certain things in society, how it works. You go to quote unquote prestige schools. Listen, they inundate their boys and girls with social capital. They have past students to sort of come back and give back, and there's a constant stream of that social capital happening. And so for me, it goes back to that whole shining your light in the darkness, because that's where the light is the brightest.
Needed, and where it's needed.
And where it's needed, you know? And so, I can even remember a time of the same El Dorado school where I was able to have a conversation with, 100 young men from Form 4, whose dean was really frustrated with the behavioral stuff. And, man, it was an awesome workshop. I invited some of the guys to come in and we did what you call a gallery walk. So there were 4 different sections in the hall, and so we had 10 minutes each, and so they traveled from wanted with a different topic that they addressed, and it was so well received, and so it sort of adds to your point that there is a need, there's something that's happening, there's a change that's happening. We're in the 21st century, and so there are new problems that are coming up, there are new things and challenges to sort of face and conquer. So yeah, there's definitely been more of a walk in that direction.
Because,
right?
I mean, as we're talking about mental health and life coaching, right? I think now more than ever, you have more people suffering with mental health problems because of things like social media.
Yeah.
And you have more people now telling you can't do something, or you can't be what you want to be because of things like social media. Have you seen or heard of anybody who built a wall or had problems as a result of social media influence?
Yeah, I think one of the major things, and let me point out, let me press pause to share this as well too. I think the work that I do really is very much forward focused.
Right.
And so what I do is I really help to empower clients to have the habits, behaviors, or mindsets to accomplish things,
right,
as opposed to the limiting beliefs that they might have gotten from stuff.
Right.
Yeah. As much as we touch on it, I don't go into say like what a therapist does and apply specific therapies, etc. But one thing that I have seen from my practice is that a lot of times, sometimes social media can be a distraction from people even accomplishing their goals. And one of the distractions that I've seen is that people do a lot of comparisons.
Right.
Right. Let's just face it. As a millennial, we value success. And I think a lot of the other generations do as well. But for us, it's so embedded because we see so much success.
And I think what you're saying, and I think what we qualify as success might be different to what the people who came before us qualify as success.
Correct. So maybe for our parents, success equal being married, having a house, a car, and
food in the fridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas for us, success might look like being confident, to be able to post something. It could look like traveling, we have different markers of success, I guess. But as it relates to mental health, or what I like to call brain fitness, because I feel like it's just such a cooler way to put, you automatically say mental health, people think madness, people think St. Anne's, right? Yeah. So brain fitness is sort of like that renaming, to show that, hey, your well-being of your mind or your mentality could be considered, that much of a term. But I've seen a lot of people do a lot of comparisons that really, really short-circuit their ability to perform. And by perform, I mean do the work that's necessary to accomplish the goals that they want. So I've personally adopted a mindset where I've now started to limit my use of social media, especially Instagram, the explore page, right? Because it is just mindless scrolling of everybody or everything that's the highlight or the highlight reel. And so now I've limited myself to just maybe the first 9 or 12 images that I see, or try to even avoid being on the explore page because I'm wasting time, right? Whereas I'm focusing more on, and this is the next point, being a consumer of social media rather than a producer of it.
Right. So what you're saying is, now you're focusing on being more of a producer than a consumer, right?
That's correct.
Because I think that is one of the places we get lost pretty easily. And you can easily, because you might even start 50-50. Yeah. 50% consuming, 50% producing. Yeah. And then you realize it started dwindle of your production rate goes down.
Yeah.
You're producing much less content and you
Yeah.
start to consume way more. So you end up 20 producing and 80%, you know, so
Yeah.
it's a very important point.
Absolutely.
I think for a point in time, I definitely suffered with that because wanting to create and you say, let me watch our next video about this. And let me watch our next video and let me watch our next video. And then you start to watch videos and you're not creating at all.
Yeah.
But all you're doing is watching videos. So
It's a trap.
Yeah, it is.
It's a trap.
And if you watch the documentary Social Dilemma, you understand it is built to trap you.
Yeah. It's really a system, huh? And it's set up just for that. Now, don't get me wrong. I spent a couple of years in social media marketing, which is hilarious in itself. I guess it found me because I had been doing it for a while in Canada. I would manage social media accounts for different organizations I was part of because I guess I was creative. I had an eye for certain things and people value that. And so I realized that it's a whole system set up to either attract or distract. Yeah. So businesses obviously use it to attract. The non-business side of it is to perhaps, detract you from your goals. And so, that's where intentionality really comes in. What are you using it for? Are you using it for the benefit that it ought to be for? Because the reality is that you could use YouTube to learn. You could also use YouTube to consume mindless content as well too.
Yes, of course.
Does that make sense?
Yes, okay. Yeah,
so it's all about the intentions of how you use it, and obviously having boundaries. These are hot topics in coaching, right? The boundaries for things, the intentionality behind it, the discipline to know that, hey, is this a habit that's helping you move forward, or is it holding you back?
All right, you said earlier on that you try to focus on moving forward rather than the things that in the past or the things that hold them back, right? But I mean, I just think I need to ask, when you meet people and you're coaching them, how many people or how often is it that people have their family issues are the things, or one of the things, that they need to get over, the hurdle they need to cross? How often is that?
Yeah,
you come across that?
very often. So in fact, one thing, if I could kind of present an image, I often like to think of my work as a slingshot. Sometimes a slingshot a slingshot has to be pulled back in order to be shot forward. And so we do, with my clients, spend some time pulling back just a bit. And the reason for the pullback is to identify where particular mindsets might have originated. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I have clients who, they wanna be successful. They wanna improve in their careers. They wanna do, different things. But sometimes taking a very keen look at the mindsets that they were socialized into. Like for instance, this is a classic one that I see very often. There are a lot of my clients that have poverty mindsets. And poverty mindsets in the sense where they don't think in abundance. They think, well, the whole world is out to get you. I'll give you an example on a very national level. If I say these words, Naldo, Syrians, and I say business, in your mind already, you've got images conjured up. Not so?
Well, other people, me, I honestly,
the average person.
The average person,
the average
yes.
person.
But for me, I think that Syrians are very poor business people. I think they are weak at business. I think they just came at the right time and they started their businesses at the right time.
Right.
And as a result, they gain the success they have.
Right.
This is my opinion, of course.
Right, of course.
But what you're seeing now is where other races are starting to catch up, and as they are catching up, you're seeing they are starting to struggle a bit. So
even the use of the word catch up is an example of that mentality, right? The mentality is that somehow there's a race and we need to fight to catch up.
Right.
And by we, whoever we are, And so for me, the typical stance is, people think of Syrian equal, business people, 1%, they own everything. And usually it elicits a lot of, let's just be honest, how did you get that money? And so for instance, having an abundance mindset doesn't look at it as wealth shaming. It looks as, well, well, I want to know how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the things that you enacted. I want to know what your work ethic is like.
Right.
Because let's just be honest as well too. While growing up, I remember a Syrian couple would be selling clothes, and they would, what is the term they call it? When you take stuff out and you pay higher purchase, I guess.
Right.
There was a word that is an expression I can't remember right now that they use. And the fact is,
Like it was
balance
parcel.
That's it, balance parcel. And the reality is that, you got that jersey at a great initial price, but obviously every time they pass, they have your name in a book, and you're probably going to be paying 3 times the amount for the jersey. At the end of the day, that's business. And at the end of the day, they were, cunning and smart enough to strategize for it. And so my point of what I'm all saying here is that sometimes the mindset that you have would really give you an insight into where you're heading and how quickly you can head there or how effectively you can get there. So for me, a lot of my clients, what I do is I try to identify what are possibly those limiting beliefs that they have. Does that make sense?
Right. But don't you think that some of that could come from just the country we live in? Meaning, because the country is so young, there is very little history for people to learn from to know how to go forward. For instance, delayed gratification, right? If you don't have perspective going backward to understand how important it is to delay gratification, then you tend to live quickly. I don't know if I'm making sense of that.
I do. I understand where you're coming from. I think we have an issue of leadership in this country, a huge one. And I think, as a coach, I really enjoy working with emerging leaders who don't have it all together, but who would like to have somewhat of a plan moving forward, to chart a way forward. And I think we have had great leaders, but I think we as a country don't really study the tenets of what makes them great leaders, and so I feel like, yes, there are gaps in terms of what we can do to really help move things forward, right? And so it's really, really important for us to fill those gaps and to really have the conversation by doing the work that's necessary. And that's why I think as a life coach, I come in because I bring people into a learning space. Does that make sense? To be able to see things in a different perspective or an alternative perspective, which would at the end of the day help them to position to really go, the place that they'd like to go to. But yes, going back to your question, a lot of family stuff usually comes up that we really work through and really help to perhaps reframe,
right?
So that we can see a specific perspective to now move forward.
I know this is maybe more of a therapist thing though. But do you come across clients who would say, well, I had to go back and correct certain things in my past, or I had to go back and make amends to certain things?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example, right? So a client comes to me and they said, hey, I want to be a better husband. That's a goal that they have, right? And so, this is a goal that I'm very familiar with. I've worked with many persons to help them to do that. And it's a very holistic approach. So we look at your history. Hey, what's the relationship that you have with your father? Who was he a husband? Did you learn? Where did you learn to be a husband from? Have you had a mentor before? What does it mean to be a man? Do you understand the tenets of that? Where are you along the process? Where are you failing? What's good? What's not good? What can you do now to improve? Is there a mindset that's blocking you from being the better husband? What does that even look like? Right? Getting into specifics. And so sometimes, yes, going back into histories, we see where I'll give you an example, right? I can think of a past client who wanted to be a better husband. Unfortunately, he was being unfaithful to his wife, which, again, there's no judgment, right, in this space. And so we were able to confront some things. And one of the things that we had realized is that his dad had abandoned him at a young age and had married someone else. And in fact, the very first time that he met his father after so many years of not seeing him, the father was actually abusive to his I guess his current wife or whatever. And so there were so many lessons that were taught in that moment, and so many that were caught as well too.
Right.
And so him as a client was sort of acting out a sort of an affairs and erotic play, right? And perhaps is really trying to find something, or perhaps is really acting out some of the things that he might have seen his father do in extramaritally. You know what I mean? So sometimes taking a look back at certain things really help you to discover where certain mindsets would have originated from, and really helping you to confront those mindsets to now perhaps relearn what is necessary for you to be able to move to that place that you want to go to.
All right. As we were talking about the country, poor leadership, or a lack of leadership, brings me into if you want to say the hot topic, or one of the things that's going on right now, where you're seeing, they're talking about so much violence against women. Personally, for me, my thing is, I am not on that campaign with violence to stop violence against women. I'm on the campaign of stop violence on the whole against everybody. Which I know a lot of women will be like, because that comes like Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. I know they would, would equate the two.
Well, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I am feminist.
Right.
So I have a very differing opinion to what you just said.
Which, of course, this could get real interesting now because. So, as I was saying, well, okay, so let's jump into that, because what I was going to ask you, with life coaching, do you think, because they say a lot of the times people go down into that negative or go into doing bad, is because they have equal opportunity to do good or equal energy to do good, but it's not channeled the right way, so they use it negatively.
Yeah.
So do you think that is probably a big part of the problem?
Yeah. I mean, let me just be straight with you. I remember one time I had a client, and it was very interesting. And it was a glimpse into this mindset, yeah? Now, just trying to give you a bit of an idea so it could sort of frame the narrative, right? So this person would have endured some abuse growing up, would have seen domestic violence, would have witnessed it within their home, would have engaged in behavior that perhaps may have been risky, correct? And I remember one time in a social setting, seeing how they would have responded to a female that was bringing something. And in that moment, it sort of highlighted for me that nuance of men thinking that they are in possession of women. And the mindset behind it was, well, yeah, you're a woman, so you got to do this for me. Like, that's just how it is. And so sometimes as a life coach, you have to help people. You got to be the mirror for people to see themselves and say, hey, is that adding towards, your cause of the goal that you're hoping to accomplish? And in this case, it would be to gain some sort of healing over it. Yeah. And so his treatment in that very still moment of passive aggressivity about bringing something for them showed it was symptomatic of something even larger than a mindset. And I feel as if the reality, and I mean, we could go down a whole long road with this one. We could rail rabbit hole into this. But I feel as if because there is a lot men really lack that socialization from other men to treat women right.
Right. I understand and I agree with that part of it. But I think this is where this is from my observation, right? I think from stifling the boy's voice, when I say the young men, right? Stifling that voice as a young man. A lot of times, let's be real, that voice is stifled by the parents. A lot of young men growing up in single homes, with single mothers, or whatever the case may be. Then we have the boys who grew up in homes with both parents, and then they see the father treating the mother a particular way, or whatever the case may be. And I think what happens is, when you're young, and you're still living at home and you can't do certain things because your parents say you can't do it, but then when you get the opportunity to live on your own or to do whatever you want to do, you overdo.
Right.
I think that is what happens.
Yeah.
I think because the voice is stifled by a particular person, or by right? And then when you get the opportunity to have, where you can have power,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because obviously you shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
But when you think you're probably big and strong enough or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
You start to try to use that power, and obviously, I think
It's abused.
It's abused.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and so, yes, I think we need to fix, because yes, I say stop violence on the whole.
Yeah.
But I think the only way we could stop it is to start dealing with people from younger stages.
I agree. I completely agree. Naldo, I think one of the important things we got to have a conversation about is the role of responsibility. And I feel like as a coach, I enjoy sharing this value with people, that you got to take responsibility. And I think that's what separates a boy from a man, right? According to Dr. Tony Evans, who wrote an amazing book called Kingdom Man, he said, the mark of a man is his responsibility. That's what separates a boy from a man. A boy is characterized by his dependence upon others. He's figuring things out in a sort of puerile way. He's trying to learn the lessons, and he's sort of in that phase. However, a man is one who takes responsibility for his life, the life of those around him, whether it might be his family or whatever, his community. He takes responsibility. Does that make sense? For his job, reaching on time, etc.
I totally agree, but I think in this country we have a culture that don't ensure people take responsibility.
Which is my point. Which is the point of what I'm saying. And part of the responsibility as it pertains to gender-based violence is the responsibility of protecting women, is the responsibility of making women feel comfortable. Like, for instance, right, I was in a taxi just yesterday, which is interesting, and a young lady comes in and she says, I'm going this location. Now, we don't know that she doesn't know the area, but she was able to express to the taxi driver, I'm going here. So on his way to me now, he realizes, oh, I haven't dropped her yet, and I've passed her out. And so he said, oh, shoot, let me go back to drop her. And she's like, oh, yeah, you forget me, because she doesn't know where she's going. So his immediate reaction when she left the car was able to say, boy, you see how women is get tied up in the wrong thing. She know where she's going. And I said, immediately I wanted to change the narrative there. And I said, no, you have to give yourself props for being a good man. Take responsibility that you did the right thing. And in that moment, he said, but but you see, this how people is thing. And, this is during Andrea Barrett's funeral, by the way, which is interesting. I said, no, you got to give yourselves props because you took responsibility for being, an upright standing person. And he said, yeah, I'm not in them kind of scene. And then in the end, he agreed with me and he said, yeah, boy, maybe it's good men like us, need to be out. And I said, yes. And in that moment, Naldo, what I thought was interesting is that I bonded with another man to say, this is what we need more of. We need more of accountability, because as a part of responsibility as well, too, who are you accountable to? Whether to yourself or to others or to a higher being or an authority figure or whatever. And there's a responsibility to now do the right thing. And so I feel that's the nitty-gritty of where the issues are, that we shirk responsibility. We don't know what it means to, and I mean, it starts as simple as I can think of you when you were a kid, doing your chores, doing it right. My nephew is like standard 2 and his book is in a mess. And I'm like, bro, what's up with this? Like, take some pride in just the way that your book looks. Why? Because that's taking responsibility. And I feel as if that is the issue. The issue is that we have a lot of boys out here who are 30-something, 40-something, 50, 60, 70-something year old boys, not men, because they're not taking responsibility for the things that they're called to do.
But then how do we get to that point? Because as I said, we live in a country where the culture is we're dependent on the government. The government has to fix this. The government has to do this. We're waiting on the government or we're waiting on somebody else. It's never our problem.
Yeah.
It's never something
shift in responsibility.
Right. But the thing is, how do we change? Because it's a culture problem.
Good. I can give my number. Shameless plug here. I can give my number. But you know, on a more serious note, though, I feel as if there needs to be more of what I do. There needs to be more coaches. There needs to be more mentors. There needs to be more people who would say, hey, you know, we have specific values and we got to be able to do this. You know, one of the things that I'm feverishly working on right now is how I can implement some of the programs that I have on a national level. Right. You know, because there's a part of me that loves policy, that loves to see things enacted in a way that would have greater impact. And so I feel like there is a bit of it happening in different groups. I know there are police youth clubs, there are church groups, there are sporting groups, there are, you know, different social groups, or, you know, that people can be a part of.
I agree. But
I think that can help.
But I think here what I think is the problem with what you're saying here, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is most of the people who are in these groups won't be the people who are causing these problems.
I agree with you. Right? I agree with you.
So how do we reach them?
It has to start in the home. You know, I was cuddling on the bed with my wife, which I enjoy doing. And I said, you know, babes, you know, we are a block in society. This unit is what comprises of a of that makes up a society, a community. And I thought to myself, you know, if we could impact families, then we could impact communities. Mm-hmm. We impact communities, we can impact the nation. And it might seem very idealistic, but the reality is, and that's why I enjoy what I do, the people that I work with, I always tell them it benefits not just themselves, but their entire families. Because, you know, once your brain expands, it can't necessarily recede. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you're somehow in a position where you can now pass that knowledge and experience and skill set on. And so, yeah, I think, you know, having a bit more, you know, opportunities to impact families, I think is a huge deal. And obviously that's something that's going to be hard because, like you rightfully said, you know, I think the fabric of families somehow, I mean, that's a whole other topic in itself, is deteriorating. But I think that, you know, the cup is half full. You know, I'm optimistic that people...
I ever told you, I don't believe that the cup is half full or half empty.
What do you believe?
The cup is totally full. You know? Think about it. The cup... Mm-hmm. The cup, it might be half full of water, but the next half is full of air.
Correct.
So the cup is...
Well, that's a whole other level of optimism there, boy.
The cup is never empty. It's never half full.
I understand.
You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
So, because at the end of the day, everything is important.
Yes.
And they have different purposes.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
If you're in a situation full of water and no air, you can drown.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
I don't know. That's something I just thought of.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And, you know, I love what I do, Naldo, because, again, it's that whole idea of bringing people into a learning space. You know, when the quarantine happened in Trinidad and everybody was under the lockdown, I did 50 days of, I guess you could call it a video cast or whatever, of I call it the living room. And the whole idea behind it was to engage in meaningful discussion, to challenge people to do better or to move closer to where they want to go. And it was very, very interesting because I touched on so many different topics. Entrepreneurship. My dentist was a single parent at 18 during med school, you know, and she was able to share. So we touched on helping single parents, you know. We touched on entrepreneurship and just different really cool life hacks and life topics that I think. And I feel like there needs to be more of that, but in a way that is that can reach people. You know, I can give an example as well too. While I was in university, there was a university-wide training that every student had to take, because one of the problems that existed was that there was a lot of sexual assault that was happening on campus. And, you know, mix raging hormones with people from all over the world, mixed with alcohol, mixed with it's just a recipe for a breeding ground for sexual assault. And what was interesting was that the university was able to enact a policy where everybody, once you signed up for university, had to do that mandatory course. I think it was like almost an hour and a half, 2 hours long, which it went through topics like, consent and creating safe spaces and respect and these different things. And I feel like more of that really needs to happen, especially in the Caribbean, where we can have open discussions about things. Because even when I started my degree as well too at the University of West Indies, we did a health and family life education course, and it was something that they wanted to implement in schools. I don't know what the process is right now. I'm unaware, but these things are vital.
I know in Grenada, there's something like that in the schools where there's one period every week to deal with just basically life and lifestyle and things like conflict resolution and those kind of things, being mannerly, proper etiquette, and these things. So that's in their school curriculum.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's why Grenada murder rate is
probably low, and it's a different society as well too. I've been to Grenada and I see the culture. It's very, very different. Very, very different. As much as we're all Caribbean, there perhaps is more of a family type vibe.
I mean, we also can't neglect the fact that it's predominantly one race, and
that might have something to do with it.
With it being like that, there's more room for unity because, and I'm not saying that races can't unite, but we have politicians who use race to separate and divide us.
Hence my supposition about our pathetic leadership, in the sense of when you think of leaders in our country, automatically I think as Trinidadians we think politicians, but we have so many other leaders who are very much unsung heroes. You don't hear much of them. And again, part of the work that I'm trying to do is highlight those amazing leaders that have been locally bred, homegrown, because that's going to really impact the morale of persons to say, hey, I could do this. I could be, like Dr. Pawan, like I could be like so many other amazing people who we've seen growing up, where we learned in social studies, you know what I mean? That can really help to change the mindset and the mentality.
But how do the good or great leaders that we have now, how do they get an opportunity? Because they will have to deal with the bad leaders, right?
Yeah.
To get the opportunity to reach the masses.
Yeah, that's a great question that I don't have the answer to. But what I can say though is that we need to have a funnel, and a funnel that could, bring those messages from there to the masses. If that makes sense. I personally grew up in a household where my parents grew us up with a growth mindset. So I'm not waiting for the government for anything. You want something, you go for it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my dad specifically said, Trinidad is too small of a place for you. Trinidad is like the arena of the world. There's so many other places that you can go and visit and learn. And I feel for me that is something that I would love to see happen more. Of course, with COVID, you can't do much traveling, but we have the internet. We have spaces of learning that can happen. I value teachers and the ability for teachers to elongate our mindsets and the way that we think. So maybe I don't know the answer.
So, because you understand how difficult it can get.
Of course.
Because, so okay, let's look at teachers. Let's look at the internet. So many things that you listed, right? If you're not well guided, if you go to the internet, you could be misguided.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
We have a lot of teachers who this is just a job for them.
Yep.
It is just a salary.
Yep. A drop in the bucket.
Exactly. Then we have teachers who are still broken from their personal situations, from their homes, from their marriages, or whatever the case may be. So when they come to interact with the children, they still not whole enough to really be that person they need to be for the children.
Yeah.
So you understand? So
I do. I do. I think a huge part of it, and again, that's why I really enjoy what I do, because I know the impact of it. And again, I'm glad that we have this conversation, because I can't wait to go back and write in my professional journal, hey, we need to do this. This needs to happen, But I long, maybe we can dream for a bit. I long for Trinidad and Tobago to have a support system within schools, like having coaches or a program that is done in tandem with the math and the science and the creative writing, that could help them think of these things. Maybe some sort of leadership training. Maybe, I developed a program called GT, Get Through or Gone Through,
Okay.
right? That was meant to be for post-SEA students, right? And teaching them the leadership skills that are necessary for the transition from primary to secondary school. I would love to see something like that happen nationwide, because why? It would give students the right tools to transform conflict, to make better decisions. Decision making is a skill. What I mean?
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
As you talk about students and whatnot, and making better decisions and resolving conflict,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel? Sorry, but I had to laugh because I know the question can be weird, especially since you have foreign experience. But how do you feel about an arm of the government or arm of social services or the Ministry of Social Development that would, when a child ends up in some sort of conflict in school and after they deal with it in school and realize, no, this problem is way bigger than we can deal with, it's a problem at home. How do you feel about social development getting involved and possibly going home, interviewing the family, or even removing a child from that home?
Ooh, touchy subject here now. Listen, that's a hard question. I'm not even gonna lie, and one that I'm almost trepidatious to respond to because there's so many perspectives from it. If I could say this, I have had an idea for, instead of there being, because we still kind of maintain this kind of archaic system of suspensions and expulsions. I would love to see some sort of a center. And by a center, I mean this might sound very idealistic, somewhere that's out in nature, somewhere that's perhaps a little far so that people can, and it sort of be like a daily thing that they go to. So instead of, suspending them and sending them home to get into trouble, they go to the center, and there they can have a conversation with perhaps a therapist or a life coach or a counselor. They could sort of relax, get a life plan, perhaps give them some sort of a perspective. And I know it sounds very idealistic, but the reality is that I'm open to solutions that can possibly solve the issues that we are having, because it may not just be the child alone too, right? It may be factors at home. I did spend some time teaching as well too, so I have a little bit of an understanding in Trinidad, for just a little bit. And I know that sometimes, students cannot learn because of the environment that they're in. Mommy's a drunkard and daddy beats mommy, or I remember having a student whose dad was shot, murdered. Like, that's trauma. And yes,
I never get into process that, but still has to come to school.
Never get into process, but still have to come to school and do well,
right?
And expected to do well. And so I feel like, yes, we have a lot of guidance counselors now, and I'm really, really happy that Trinidad has really gone into that direction. Every school has a guidance counselor, or at least is serviced from one, whether it might be. But I think we could take a step further where we have preventative measures, where we have workshops to now help them, or we have programs or policies that would help to now, introduce the other side of the perspective. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say to be more proactive than rather reactive.
Right, which I think was one of the issues here, and
yeah,
and that's what I was saying. I think we really need to get into fixing homes and dealing with these people from the smallest stage.
Yeah.
Just in a recent podcast I did, a guy was saying he was in Sangre Grande, and a man was with his son, and for whatever reason his son started to cry, and the man told his son, "Hey, listen, no, don't cry. How you be a man if you cry?" You understand what I'm saying?
And that breaks my heart, to be honest. It really, really breaks my heart. I remember doing a fatherhood workshop, which was really, really interesting, and it was progressive because in there I had a few fathers from I would say disenfranchised neighborhood, because the school was one of the schools that kids would not necessarily put as their first choice, if you know what I'm trying to say. But I loved how the administration was so progressive in having this type of workshop for the fathers, and it was amazing because I was able to help them to see a different perspective. Again, that's what a coach does. I created the framework for them to say, well, no, like it's okay to show emotions, because the reality is that if the emotions aren't, processed, a lot of times it becomes suppressed. And then when it's suppressed in a high stress environment, it becomes a trigger, and then boom, you have heinous crimes happening. Because why? It's like a pressure cooker, right, Naldo? You have all these emotions bottled up, pressure cooking for years. And so I could say for the work that I do, it's soothing just to be able to put that under water and really take a peek into what's inside, and perhaps, clean out and perhaps put what you really need to do so you can have a great meal or a fulfilling life.
I could relate to that because for me, I had a lot of emotions pent up when my dad died, and I was 8 years old. And to be totally honest, back then, boys or men don't cry.
Yeah.
So I remember going to the funeral and keeping this
Yeah.
mean face on and trying not to cry because 8 years old, man, you're not crying. And I remember I cried those tears probably I would say in my 20s, right? So, and having that pent up for a while. Now, that turned me into a monster, in my teenage years.
Yeah.
So, but it's only after, I lie down years after and I lay in my bed and I thought about my dad and whatnot and the tears ran then. But I could tell you, even, so what happened was, okay, that happened when I was 8 years old. I picked up the streak of fighting. And then I went into secondary school. Still fighting. And then my little cousin died. And in this way, she was the closest cousin to me. Because I have a lot of little cousins, but for some reason they just didn't take to me, right? But she took to me and she died. I remember I went in school that week and I cut from her side. I beat people like their parents.
Yeah.
And probably worse.
Yeah.
But, and, looking at it after, it was like, wait, obviously, then I was asked to not return to that school eventually, right? Because I see him fighting and misbehavior. And now I'm in a WhatsApp group with some of those guys from that school. So I left that school in Form 3. And, I realized these fellas, because I've obviously over the years, I've processed a lot of these things and become a different person. These fellas don't really even know who I am now, if you understand, who they knew me to be. I was like, wow, you understand what I'm saying?
And then what you have to do now is introduce to them the updated version of you.
Right, and which I have, and I mean, a lot of them are like, wow, you real change, And, my perspective on things obviously would be, hey, no, not violence. And they're like, you?
Yeah.
Not violence,
He was the most violent man we know.
Yeah. And it just shows how important it is to process. And obviously, as I say, in becoming, I'm a person who eventually I started to go against the tide. I was always a person to go against the tide, right? And what happened for me is that I started to process these things, like even bad relationships and stuff. I decided, hey, going on now. I go in and cry, I go in and cry and get out. I go in and say if something hurt me, and men will say, you gotta get over that, or to let people know that she hurt you so bad, or whatever the case may be. And it's until I started to process things for myself and get these things out, then I was able to be, a much better person.
We have such a dismissive culture in the Caribbean. I mean, I don't know what it is. And I'm glad to have spent a chunk of time outside of the Caribbean because it has made me reflect on what we consider normal. Yeah. So a lot of dysfunctional things we call normal and a lot of functional things we consider abnormal. I remember one time I was in Guadeloupe, I think it was, in the airport. And I remember this was like one of those memories that was etched into your mind. I saw a dad, what looked like a dad, and a grown son kiss each other, and the little French that I knew then, he was like, I love you, son, have a great trip. And for me, I like flipped out because in my mind, I'm thinking, how odd. And looking back at it now, I'll probably do the same thing with my grown son and kiss him and tell him I love him Because why? We have these social norms of what acceptable and norms in inverted commas here of acceptable behavior. And one of them obviously is that whole notion of men don't cry or men don't show emotions because it's somehow considered feminine. I don't know from who we learned this nonsense from, but the reality is that pervading culture that has existed has resulted in so many criminals. Because why? As a coach, I have a method that I usually go through with my clients. Again, it's very forward focused, and so it's the suppress, process, express method. And basically, it is you identify these suppressed emotions. So an example would be, and let me just try it with you right now, Ronaldo. How it is that you might have felt when your dad passed away. What are the emotions that come to mind? So as it pertains to my dad passing away, I felt.
I honestly felt lost. I felt lost. I felt lost.
Yeah.
I felt like my life was derailed. I didn't know what to do. At 8 years old.
Unimportant.
Yeah. I felt like you have no purpose now.
Purposeless. Yeah. And then two, a dominant emotion would be I felt sad. The man that I knew to be my father, who took me for ice cream every Friday night, has now died. And so there's layers to what that would mean. I mean, that's going into stages of grief and from the moment you said it, I was able to identify that part of the stage of grief is anger. Anger is one of those stages because the person to whom, you would have loved is no longer there. And that's a crisis, right? And so having said that and sort of asking you those questions, you begin to now identify those suppressed emotions and you begin to now process it. Right. And so, I take my clients through a process of I'll do that, whether it might be through journaling, whether it might be through having a conversation, role play. I remember there was one time, with a client, we did a role playing session and big hardback man just offloaded the emotions that he never expressed when he was younger at the death of his grandmothers who mothered him,
right.
And then what is that going to do? It's going to, because think of it as a bottle, right? You have all this dross inside of it. And when that dross is now removed, you have the capacity to now express, which is suppress, process, express the right emotions within, or to now bring people into a good space to be able to express themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so I feel like we have a lot of people who are walking around with suppressed stuff. A lot. I'll give an example. My dad got into a life-altering accident. He pretty much lost the use of his legs. Which, if you know my dad, he's the most outgoing, charismatic guy you've ever met. And to now one day just be relegated to a wheelchair, that's depressing, along with all the other emotions. And so, he has unfortunately never been able to really professionally process some of those things that he might have gone through. And so our relationship was a bit embattled because I unfortunately was the container for a lot of that depression that he might have had. Of course, I'm more mature now. I'm older. I can now understand things. I can now reframe narratives. I can look at things. I can find out, and so now it's in a way better position. But imagine that there are a lot of people who just lost the use of certain things, or they would have lost stuff, and they're just walking around with that loss. And so the work that I do is to really help to bring them into that safe space to process with no judgment. No, they don't have to feel like they have to put on a front or a mask. You can tell they got honest truth. I felt broken when my girlfriend cheated on me, or I felt to do X, Y, and Z, or I felt betrayed when my job fired me and hired somebody of the same race. You know what I mean? Like these are legitimate feelings that people go through. My only wish is that people are able to seek out the right help, the appropriate help to be able to process those things.
No, I appreciate all that you're saying, but can I want to, obviously it's the Alternative Perspectives podcast. So alternative perspective here. And obviously it's always good for someone to work on themselves, right? Not taking that away. It's also very important. But what about the people who sometimes pull the trigger for other people, the people who pressure these people? Reason I'm asking. And is to come back to the situation of what's going on right now in Trinidad and Tobago, with the violence against women and whatnot. And yeah, you have a lot of men who may not really know where they fall in the situation. I'm not violent to any woman. I've never really, right? I may have done some things that may not have been the best and I think sometimes that's all part of growing up. I'm not talking about anything extreme, right? You understand what I'm saying? But then you have a whole society of people now, a lot of people making it seem like all men are bad. And you have this person now feeling like, I mean, I'm trying, but you'll continue saying that we men are bad.
Right.
You understand?
Right. Yeah.
So
I understand. I understand the perspective.
No, as I say, obviously, if this person is strong and have worked on themselves, they'll be okay.
Right.
But what about the person who they haven't reached that place as yet, or they haven't reached that place as yet, sorry. And you have a lot of other things in society pressuring them. Should we start addressing things in society to, in other words, to let people know, hey, listen, there are some people who need some time to work on some things or be more specific in when you're targeting or you're dealing with a particular issue. I don't know how we could word it. And I'll tell you why I asked that after.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's one major tenet, and I think I mentioned it before, Naldo. Responsibility is a huge, place to start. I don't work with everyone. And the reason I don't work with everyone, because in my initial consultation, I have to make my processes protect me. I need to know that you are, one, capable of doing this process. Two, you're willing to put in the work. And three, you are ready to invest in yourself. You're ready to do what is necessary. You're able to be open-minded, yeah? And to confront some things, yeah? And I think one of the thing that is obviously lacking is that we don't take responsibility. Even the people who might trigger others, they're individuals, and they have responsibility as well to figure out, well, what is triggering them or why it would push them. Unfortunately, and it breaks my heart every time, we know that people are doing wrong stuff, but we don't confront them, and we don't pull up their socks and say, hey, what are you really doing? Well, because I think there's a lack of values, and hear me out. My mother and I had this conversation. The people who were charged with Andrea Barrett's murder, the young man and his common law wife, right? There's a part of me that asks the question on her part, because she was charged with receiving stolen goods. Would you not ask where you would have gotten this from? How would you have obtained that? There's a measure of responsibility here. You know what I mean? Of course, she was complicit because she received the stuff. But I also have a thing now. Does your family know what you're doing? How are they now keeping you accountable? Where's the ownership in that regard as well too?
I think that is very easy. That's an easy conversation, an easy question to ask. If you don't know what the lifestyle is in those places. Correct. Because I could tell you, it have mothers that is getting licks from their sons. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. There are fathers who live in fear of their children as well. Yeah. Right? Correct. And even, let's just say, as a lot of people on social media saying, if you have a brethren whoever, you know somebody who's doing wrong, and you don't tell them anything, you're part of the problem. Sometimes I am not really close friends with that person, but I'm afraid to probably distance myself, or I've known this person from childhood coming up. You understand what I'm saying? And I tell you, I know somebody who grew up in a troubled area, and he tells me, he said, listen, the reason I keep in touch with these fellas is because if anything ever goes wrong and they realize I was distant, I don't want them to feel that I was the one that sell them out or put them up, as they would say. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. So I understand what you're saying.
So for him, somebody might say, but they just do wrong and you're not calling them out. But he's living in fear now. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. That's a real problem.
I think so. I think I understand what you're saying. I think there also needs to be, because, in discussion of manhood, we spoke about the responsibility aspect, right? One of the things that I am responsible for is my neighborhood. A lot of people don't think this way, but if I see somebody who I don't usually see and they're going somewhere, it's my responsibility because I was made aware of it to alert the necessary persons that are responsible. And I feel that's the piece that I think, especially Trinidad and Tobago, is lacking. They're lacking that brother's keeper mentality. Because everybody have gotten into the, well, I would just do my own thing on my own way.
But I think people do it now because they have gotten burnt.
Which is a whole other issue in itself. Because maybe there may be some unresolved and unprocessed things that they perhaps need to take into consideration. But again, I think assuming responsibility and taking up responsibility is one of the most poignant ways that we can solve this issue. You gotta take responsibility. Like that taxi driver that I mentioned earlier, who took responsibility by not endangering the life of that female passenger. He took responsibility. As much as he was, all caught up in, like, a woman is getting... I had to remind him that he took responsibility. You need to give yourself some credit for doing so. He made the decision not to take her up Cora and sexually assault her. He made the decision to drive back.
I think I kind of weird to say though.
No, man.
Let me tell you
got to
why.
look at it in that perspective as well.
No, I understand your perspective. But the average person who that was never a thought for them, I just do the right thing. I don't think they would say that. I don't think I have to make an effort to do the right thing. If you understand what I'm saying, I don't have to think about doing the right thing.
In some cases, you have to make an effort to be the right thing. And, I'm glad that I was there to reiterate to him and to almost reassure him that he did the right thing. Although it wasn't his intention to go sexually assault this female. Now, don't get me wrong. In addition to, and I feel like that's part of and maybe this is where you're kind of going. Yes, there's also a responsibility that female should have taken as well to ensure that she at least knows her location.
I wouldn't say that because at the end of the day, that's what we do. At the end, if I'm going for a job interview, I don't know where the place is until I start to work there.
We're trusting.
Right?
Yeah.
So I come, you're a taxi man, I sit down in a taxi and I expect you to...
I was told where to go.
Right.
So I'm trusting that you...
And I think that is where the debate comes in with PH and H, right? Because at the end of the day, if I sit down in a H car or I sit down in a TTRS or one of them, I know that somebody would have done some level of background check on this person and make sure that this person, right?
Yeah.
Is somewhat trustworthy because, people could flip like a switch. But that is where I think that comes in. So when this person sits in this taxi, they could trust that, hey, listen, I want to go here. And okay, he might have had some lapse in thinking and forget the person, stop, however the case may be. But the point I was making is that, and I understand what you're saying with taking responsibility, but some people, they don't even see it as having to take responsibility because that is just how they are. They are good people.
Right.
That's never my intention. That's never even my thought. I understand also you giving him the praise or, which could now probably change his perspective and
perhaps
he could, and he could probably carry this forward now to other people and say,
right.
Well, yeah, bro.
Can I say two things here? Two things that are coming to mind. My wife is such a wise woman. She says, Brendon, she picks at me, because she's like, oh, you have such a pure heart, blah, blah, blah. She does as well, but she's been through so many different life experiences that have now taught her to see the other perspective, right? So she will say, you see the good in people's heart, but she says you have to be mature and see the evil as well. So that's one, and I feel like that's important to note there. But I think the other underlying factor that perhaps we need to take into consideration is something called smart trust. Smart trust is that my ability to trust a person or system or structure would only increase when I've been able to see there being a sort of reciprocal nature in it. So my smart trust will build when I've seen that you've placed action or response to something that I would have said or done. Does that make sense? And I feel maybe that's one of the issues that are very much lacking. We're lacking in smart trust. We don't trust our leaders because we know that they will say one thing and then
do another.
Some people in marriages don't trust their spouses because you claim to do this, but then you're doing X, Y, and Z. And really and truly, what it comes down to, Naldo, here is really a conversation about values. What it is that you really value. And if you value that thing, then your life is going to be based around it.
Right.
So if I value, I don't know, something as simple as, I don't know, unity, right? You're going to do whatever is necessary to ensure that there is unity, right? If you value health, you live a particular lifestyle. I think having a conversation about really fine-tuning those values need to be had, and from a young age as well too. Just as I had mentioned with my nephew, hey, your work ethic is a value that I want him to espouse from a young age, because he wants to be a cartoonist. And I said to him, when you're going to these big companies, and you wouldn't give them a bunch of chicken scratch, you'll give them something that's presentable, right? And so learn those values from now so that you can perhaps use them. And obviously, I think that's where a lot of the problem. We don't have a lot of men. And I'm giving the flack for the men here. We don't have a lot of men who don't take responsibility for inculcating those values into our children. And so therefore you have a bunch of boys that are running around without those values, without the knowledge of how to do it, unless you have that wherewithal within yourself to find the right people to connect to get those values.
To be fair, a lot of these men not in the homes.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's the point of what I'm saying.
But the thing is, we need to find a way, because we can't expect them to do it, because we have to find a way excluding them. Right. Obviously, we need to find a way to get them to stay in the homes, right, or to go back to the homes. Right. But in the meantime, we had to find a way to. And I mean, I know it's probably going for a while, so we should look to wrap up. But as you're talking about this, a few weeks ago, I went to a little birthday party, and a young boy.
You get a party bag?
Yes, actually. And a young boy, he was about 9 years old, and he had a great amount of resentment for females.
At 9.
At 9.
Wow.
And the reason he had this resentment is because he is saying that women could do what they want and get away. But men, we always get in trouble. Or boys, we always get in trouble.
Wow.
So what he is saying is, a girl could lash me and nobody wouldn't do anything. But if I lash her back, I will get in trouble, or the police will want to lock me up. You understand? And he was furious.
At 9, wow.
He was furious.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, I wasn't prepared to do that.
Yeah.
I tried, because that is how I am. I would always try as much as I can, but I was not prepared to deal with that with a 9-year-old. I could probably talk to somebody bigger, right? I could deal with my 9-year-old,
right? Yeah.
Right, because I know how she's brought up and what she's exposed to. But a 9-year-old boy who, I mean, I don't know his parenting structure too well. He has both parents, but do you think that even those things put pressure on men? And it's the same thing I was talking about just now. With a lot of times, boys are under pressure, which sometimes boys and men, which sometimes make them build resentment towards women. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I understand what you're saying. My perspective in it is, okay, one of the things that I live by and I value is mentorship. I think that mentorship is important. You look at the most successful people in the world, based on whatever standard you have, they've been mentored, they've been coached, they've had advisors, they've had trusted people to whom can now pull out the best in them. And I feel that's a huge part to play in it. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the resentment that some boys or men may feel because they think women have the extra, added, I don't know, whatever factor in there. But the reality is that, again, it goes back to my definition of man, which is to take responsibility. We've got a responsibility as men, as leaders, to protect, to have those right skills or behaviors or mindsets to change situations. I mean, I don't want to get into like too much of it. I mean, maybe I could just say this because there's this book that I read that put it in such a great way. A man has a penis. A man penetrates. A woman has a vagina. She receives. And so as a man, perhaps in our biological makeup, there is an essence to the purpose of why he exists, which is to embed and which is to give life to by through that penetration. And so perhaps, it will be very interesting to find out who are the male voices that are transitioning that boy into a man? You know, what are they saying to him if they're even there? You know, who is he hearing those things from? Because again, you're either taught or it's caught.
Right.
You know. So it will be very interesting to have a conversation to help to reframe those narratives. So it's not that a woman, and because women have to go through things as well too. Like
Well,
you have to look at it in different perspectives
I'm trying
as
to
well.
explain that to him, but
Yeah,
I mean, obviously he's 9.
A woman carries a child for 9 months. Men don't do that. You know, women have to go through the pain.
No, I told him that, right? And he said, but they just got to stay home.
They got to stay home,
right?
right?
Like when you have to
Poor
make
guys.
the baby, right?
Poor guys.
So he's like, but they just got to stay home. I say, yeah, but
in his defense as well too, I understand what the mindset of where he's coming from, because I mean, let's just be honest, maternity leave in Trinidad is what, 4 months?
3 months. Yeah,
Nonsense. 3 months. Yeah. I mean, coming from the Canadian society, it's an entire year,
right?
That you get, you know, and you know, there is a disparity between. Come on, let's just go there. Maternity and paternity leave,
exactly.
Right? There's a disparity. And so these are great conversations that we can now, you know, have with our young boys that, hey, you know, we got to do what we got to do. And maybe that's all I'm really kind of just pushing for. We got to take responsibility for what we have to do. And maybe there's a whole crop of people who aren't taking responsibility, and that's why maybe there's a breakdown. There's a breakdown because people are not actively performing their roles. You see what I'm saying? And so the reality is that there's something that's broken that we need to fix. And I think that coaching is one of the things that I have dedicated my life to help use as a tool to fix. If that's what I
understand. And I totally understand.
Yeah.
So, Brendon, we have been going for a while. So, of course, the doors are always open for you to come anytime and discuss anything.
Yeah.
I would definitely like to discuss this feminism. And as you say, you're a feminist.
I am.
And I mean...
Yeah.
I mean,
and not to make it. Let's just take the bells and whistles out of it. A feminist is somebody who just believes in you know, female empowerment. So I think that there are different spectrums of feminism.
All right.
Yeah. So just to make that very clear, there are different subsections of feminism. I am not of the radical feminist train of thought, but I do believe that women should be empowered. I do believe that it's a man's role to be an ally in that support, because the reality is there's yin and yang, there's male and female, there's a togetherness that needs to come to, you know, into play for there to be harmony. And so I am just one of those men who strongly believe that we should do all we can to make sure that our women are protected, provided for, partnered with. That's all the extent of my feminism.
But in Trinidad, do you think that there's some degree of imbalance?
Absolutely.
For men, no?
Absolutely.
Serious?
Yes. Look at this in this way. I would say one chore, and you tell me automatically, with thinking of the psyche of an average Trinidadian, who's responsible for it? Cooking.
Well, I guess they would say women.
Taking out the garbage.
Men. I'm talking about what the average people think,
Which
right?
is my point.
Right? No, because my brain is so disgusting, right? Because from the time I say cooking, I would say, well, one, it doesn't matter, but two, some of the greatest chefs in the world are men. So they can't tell my woman is the cook.
Right.
If some of the greatest chefs in the world are men.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then in my house, I cook.
Yeah.
Me too. In my house.
Yeah, me too.
Whoever pick up the garbage and put it out.
Right.
No, we don't have big garbage bags, obviously, right? So small, it's a little family, right? Whoever picks up the garbage and put it out.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So, I mean, probably I have a lot of learning to do because the way I see things, I mean, I also think in Trinidad, I think there are a lot of powerful women in Trinidad and Tobago. I
definitely agree, and I love to see it, and I'm not threatened by it.
Neither am I.
Well, therefore, we're in the same crop. So maybe you are more feminist than you think you are. No, but the reality is that there are a lot of men who are insecure because they see how women are rising to power or are being very powerful in certain things. Listen, I mean, this is just everything aside. I'm attracted to my wife because of how powerful she is. I love the fact that she could command her space. She could command her actions. I am not threatened by it at all. And in fact, I love it. You understand what I'm saying? Whereas there may be some men who would want to feel a particular type of way when they see a woman in a power suit and some high heels making big decisions. You understand what I'm saying? But I think just like Mia Motley, I can think of her as an excellent example of a female leader. You know, she said in one of her speeches that I absolutely acquiesced it. You know, she said that as a woman, you have an extra added advantage because sometimes women are mothers. And so they have a side to seeing a perspective that is unique. And I value that. And I would love to see more men who value that and who don't feel threatened by it and who can now harmoniously do things, you know, just to make lives better.
I think you have opened my mind a bit. And I'm gonna definitely do some thinking. As I said, I was never against it.
Yeah.
But I think the part of men who are uncomfortable with it, insecure men, I think sometimes I forget they exist.
Yeah.
And I do apologize for that.
Good.
Right? Yeah.
Good.
You know, because I am not like that.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of the people I'm around are like that either.
In your sphere of influence. Listen, the reality is, and I've seen this from the different places. I've traveled extensively around the world, so I've seen it in different cultures as well, too, where there's an embedded, sometimes very cultural, dictated mindset that women ought to XYZ, men ought to XYZ, and you know, my thing is, who cares? You know what I mean? Why can't we reframe that narrative and say, hey, whatever you're strong at, that's what you can probably take out the role on. And that's the liberal sort of mindset my wife and I have in our household. Whatever you're functional and great at, why not kill it in that respect, right? So yeah, it's all about reframing the narratives. It's all about looking at the other perspectives and seeing what can possibly, you know, work well.
Nice. So Brendon,
yes,
thank you so much.
Thank you
for spending this time with us.
Yeah, man.
And guys, remember, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, feel free to hit it a 5-star rating and leave a review and share this around with your friends. So Brendon, thanks again, Brendon.
You're most welcome.
Do you want to leave a phone number for people to contact you?
Yes, for sure. I can give you my contacts. So my business line is 265-0562. I'm also on Instagram, on Facebook, Best Fit Consult. On Instagram, Best Fit Consultancy on Facebook. And the website is supposed to be launched actually very soon, so I can actually give the handle. Maybe people can actually use it. bestfitconsultancy.com.
Nice, sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here again.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, man, great.
Awesome.
Till the next one. Well, see you guys or hear you guys or you hear me very soon again. Bye.